Thank you, and I'm really happy to be here. It's going to take me a little while to get used to this microphone, so please bear with me. And so I'm a psychologist, and as a psychologist, I'm always aware of how people are doing, how people are feeling. And so we're all here this afternoon. How many people worked today? Had to go to work? Okay, how many people had classes today? Okay. How many people have homework tonight? Okay, a lot going on. How many people got a good night's sleep last night? How many people wish they got more sleep last night? Okay, well, I'm a sleep researcher, so I'll talk a little bit about that. Well, considering all that stuff that's going on, we have about an hour now to spend together. And so if you're eating, that's fine, you can keep eating. If you want to, you can just take a moment, finish what's in your mouth. And let's just take a moment to relax together by just doing a couple of nice relaxing breaths. So get comfortable in your chair, relax your body, relax your shoulders. Take a nice deep breath, let it out, relax, let go of some of the stuff that was going on at school today, whatever might be stressing you out. Let's do one more. Okay, I feel better. I'm a little less nervous now. So I'm going to talk to you today about a couple of different things. I'm going to introduce myself, share the kind of work that I'm doing now. Then I'm going to talk about my educational and work career trajectory, because they really go together. I want to share that information with you in the hope that you might find it interesting or useful as you voyage on your own career and on your own trajectory to the goal of developing your career, finding the job that you want. And I'm also going to talk about the research that I do, and I can mention clinical work. I'm also very open to having people ask me questions at any point in the talk, so feel free to raise your hand if you have a question, or if you're interested in something I haven't mentioned that you think I might know about, feel free to ask me. So I'm going to talk about my current work, which is I'm a full-time research psychologist at SRI International in Menlo Park. SRI International is a really large research institute that has done things like the computer mouse was invented there long ago. More recently, Siri, which is on your iPhone, was invented at SRI and then sold to Apple Computer. We also do research on medicine, robotics, all different types of things. And I do research on adolescent brain development and sleep, and you'll see more about that. I'm also a clinical psychologist, and so I founded a small private practice that I do after my other job, where I see patients and help them with the problems they might be facing. And that's called Granite Psychology. So at SRI International, I do a lot of different things as a research psychologist. I manage a team of research associates. These are RAs. These are young people like yourselves who usually have a bachelor's degree and are working for us, collecting the data for our study. I work with them, I train them, I also collect data with them, but I'm kind of helping them get their jobs done. I work as a clinical consultant on the project. So sometimes we have people who come in to participate in our research, and they're depressed, they're suicidal, they have been abused, and they need to talk to somebody, or somebody needs to work with them, and that's what I'm there for. I manage and organize a lot of data. I spend a fair amount of time in front of a computer looking at large spreadsheets of data and making sure that it's up to date, making sure that it all makes sense, things like that. The research study that I'm a participant in that I'm working on is a consortium, meaning that it's being conducted at 5 sites around the country all at once. SRI is just one of the sites. So every year I travel to the other 4 sites and I do evaluations and training to make sure that the data collection is the same at all the sites. So that if we're using a questionnaire, we're using it the same way at each site. If we're giving a neuropsychological test, we're giving it the same way at each site. So that when we finish this study, we can pool all that data and it will all fit nicely together. So I'm going to show you a video that will tell you more about the NCAN research project.
Sandra Brown, the coordinator of the National Consortium on Alcohol and Neurodevelopment in Adolescence. Our research is aimed at understanding how heavy use of alcohol during adolescence may disrupt brain development. This project represents a critical step in understanding the neurobiological risks for accelerated alcohol use and alcohol's effects on brain development in adolescence. We study brain functioning in adolescence with neuroimaging techniques, neuropsychological testing, and clinical interviews. The major focus of our project is the identification of youth at risk for substance use problems. We're conducting this research at 5 sites across the nation: University of Pittsburgh, Duke University, SRI International, Oregon Health Sciences University, and right here at the University of California, San Diego. For this consortium, we're recruiting over 800 youth from these communities who are between the ages of 12 and 21. And each participant will complete a comprehensive assessment battery at baseline and then 3 annual follow-up assessments. The results of our study will help clarify how alcohol can affect the structure and function of critical brain regions that are under development during adolescence, as well as the practical impact of alcohol on the day-to-day lives of teens. In addition to our scientific publications and presentations, we will work with community and national organizations to share these findings so that they can guide public policy and be incorporated into prevention and intervention efforts for youth.
Okay, so that's the NCANVAS study that I'm a part of, and that's what I work on at SRI. On the sort of the third part of the study, I'm going to talk more about the MRI, the testing, the things that we do in that study to collect data and learn about kids' brains. So the other thing that I do, I mentioned before, is Granite Psychology. This is my website. As a clinical psychologist, I am responsible for everything: advertising, marketing, budgeting, clinical treatment, planning, insurance, all this different type of thing. I'm a small business owner, and I have to do a lot of different things to maintain that. I have to maintain my license, I have to get continuing education. A lot of stuff actually goes into it, but it's really, really fun for me. I love clinical work. I really enjoy working with people and helping them deal with their mental health problems, helping them get better. I find it to be very rewarding, and it's a nice balance to the research that I do, which is more technical, more science-oriented. That's more person-oriented, and I really enjoy that. It's been really nice for me to be able to balance that out. We'll get into the next part, which is about how I got where I am now. You sort of see what I'm doing now, you sort of see where I am. Any questions before we get into this next part about my background and history, growing up? Any questions so far about the studies or anything like that? Yes?
For the studies, you said that you do like 3-year, every annual assessment.
That's right.
So how do you keep in touch with the students that may be at risk? I mean, the young people, because sometimes they go off and disappear.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
So is that something that you sort of deal with, or do you try to track them down?
That's a challenge. So we face that challenge in a couple ways. One, we start with a huge sample, 800 plus people. So if we lose some, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. But we do work really hard to keep all of our participants. When we first meet with them, we try to get as much contact information as we can, and also information about family and other people that might know how to get to them if they move or go to college or move to another state. So yeah, that's a challenge for all longitudinal research. UC San Diego has done a lot of this longitudinal research, and they're really good at keeping track of their participants. So we're learning from them, and we're sort of asking them for help. Like right now, it's year 2, so we're bringing people back, and we have about 12 people who are MIA, we can't find them, you know, or they just don't want to talk to us anymore. Sometimes they're just like, no, did it, I'm done. And that's fine. We respect that. But we're trying to get them in because the more, you know, the people we can keep involved, the better our research will be in the end. Yeah. And you're right that that could be a serious confound if all the people that left the study were the ones who developed the alcohol problems. And then, you know, you'd say at the end of the study, oh, look, nobody has any alcohol problems. That'd be a very bad science, right? That's a good question. Okay, any other questions? Yes?
In terms of other participants, target class, I mean, is it completely random or do you have specific targets to people who are participating?
That's a great question. Boy, I wish it was completely random. That would make it much better science. Unfortunately, it's not. And the non-random factor is essentially a selection bias of people who choose voluntarily to participate in research. So there is a bias inherent right from the beginning. We were advertising, hey, you want to be in this study? Here's what it is, we'll pay you. In fact, last year I was on this campus hanging up flyers, getting students from this school and all the other colleges around here and the high schools around here and the middle schools around here, asking them if they'd like to participate. But it wasn't random. It was the people who were motivated to participate, and for whatever reason, that might be they wanted the compensation, they wanted to learn about science, their parents told them to do it, who knows. So yeah, that's a real bias. A perfect study, we would have gone to schools and we would have forced everyone to sign up, or every third person or something like that, but we can't do that. So yeah, that's a weakness for sure. Good question. Any other general questions about the research? Yes?
You were testing, it's on 12-year-olds to 21-year-olds.
That's right.
And this is for alcohol consumption, like how...
The main thing we're looking at is how alcohol affects the brain. That's the main focus of the NCANDA project. And so we're starting with 12-year-olds and going all the way up to 21 because that's the brain continues to develop all the way into the early 20s. And so we want to look at how the brain is still changing, even at that late, early adulthood. We're starting very young with 12-year-olds because we want to catch a significant amount of our population, of our sample, before they started drinking. If we had more money and more time, we would only recruit 12-year-olds, and then we would follow them for 12 years. But that would take 12 years to do, and we don't want to wait that long. So instead, we recruit from 12 to 21 and follow them for 4 years. And then with our large sample size, we can create a model of brain development from 12 all the way up to 24 and see what that looks like. And we're hopeful that most of our 12-year-olds will not have started drinking yet. And that is pretty true. Of course, there are kids 12 or younger who do use alcohol, but they're not as many, not as frequent as, say, 15, 16-year-olds. Yeah, good question. Any more questions about this study? Or my private practice or anything like that? Okay, I'm going to talk now about the path. How did I get here? And so you know a little bit about me now. You're looking at me, you're seeing me, you maybe read my bio or something like that. So we're all making assumptions. You're all making assumptions about me. That's normal. That's absolutely what you should be doing. What's my background? Where did I go to school? What did I study? What kind of a student was I? What am I like? Where am I from? And you may have certain ideas in your head about what the answers to those questions are based on what I'm doing now. I'm going to answer these questions, and if you can think right now, like sort of in your mind, answer those questions for yourself and hold those answers. And then as I tell my story, some of them will be confirmed. You'll say, yep, he is just like I thought. Or some of them may be, oh my gosh, that's not what I expected. And the reason I'm doing this is because we also make assumptions about ourselves. As young students, you assume certain things about yourself and where you're going to be headed. And what I want to show here is that what you think now may be different in the future. That's one possibility. And so anyways, let's look at what happened to me. So my work in education history, detour, there were a lot of detours. I didn't follow a straight path, or at least not the straight path that I think our culture sort of portrays as like, here's how you get to be successful. You go from point A to B to C to D, and then you're happy and successful and you live happily ever after. That didn't happen for me. So we're going to look at all the schools I went to and all the jobs that I had. And I had a lot. So I started out at, let's just start at high school, at an all-boys Roman Catholic high school where there were nuns and brothers teaching me, and they were really strict, and I did not have a lot of fun. I got okay grades, but yeah, you know, it wasn't that great. I didn't think I was that smart because I didn't get straight A's, and school was hard, and it was boring. I didn't really want to study. A funny thing, looking back on it, I realized that I got an award once for the PSAT, which is like before you take the SATs, and I did really well on that. And so I got called out of the office one day, and I thought I was in trouble. And they're like, oh, you got this award, congratulations. But I didn't know what it meant. My parents didn't know what it meant. They didn't take the SATs, they didn't go to college. Nobody told me, hey, this means you're pretty good at taking this kind of test. This might be good, you might get into a good school. I didn't know. I said, oh, okay, cool. I don't know what happened to that award, but I remember that. So while I was in high school, I worked, and I was a lifeguard and a swim coach, and I worked with kids in the swimming pool. And you're going to see here a pattern, a theme that starts emerging at this early stage. I also did heating and air conditioning. That's what my dad did. He had a small business, and so when I had free time, I went to work for him and helped him in the summers, and learned all about heating and air conditioning. So I went from there to the University of New Hampshire. I grew up in New Hampshire, so it was like my state school. It was less expensive for me, but it was a good school. I think it was a pretty good quality school. And I started out in mechanical engineering. That was my major. So, yay, mechanical engineering, got in freshman year, went in, I had physics, I had calculus, I think I had an English class, I think I had a class about soils, like for gen ed. Okay, failed physics, failed calculus, failed soils, got a C in English. Okay, all right, that's first semester. All right, let's try again, second semester. Let's see, I'll take physics again. You know what, I better take advanced algebra, which was like the class before calculus. Even though I took pre-calculus in high school and I did fine, I figured, well, let me take that again and get warmed up for the calculus. Took that soil class again, because I had to get rid of that F, and I don't know what else I took. Failed physics again. Failed the pre-calculus class. Got like a C in that soil class, and I don't know, C in something else. So, not what I was expecting. Okay, so they said, all right, you're done, go home, academic suspension, take a semester off, and then you can come back and try again. Which is what I did. I went home, worked for my dad, worked as a lifeguard, took some time off. So I think it's interesting what happened. I went to this all-boys Roman Catholic high school. I got pretty good grades. Probably was at least average intelligence according to that test that I took. So what happened? Well, a lot of things were going on in my life at that time. I didn't know any of this at the time. I just thought I was dumb and that I was really bad at science and stuff. So I was kind of depressed. My parents were getting divorced. I joined the swim team. I was drinking way too much, partying too much with the swim team. I was way more into the social scene of being on the sports team. I wasn't that into studying. I went from a really strict environment where every move I made was scrutinized. I got in trouble in high school for shaving my head for swim team. I had suspensions until my hair grew back, or detentions. I would get in trouble for not wearing socks or not wearing a belt. Every move was watched. And then I went to college where I was like, wait, I don't have to go to class? Oh, great. Nobody's checking my homework? Wow, this is awesome. But it wasn't so good. So it was a really tough adjustment for me. So that was really hard. But I went back to school, and I went undeclared for a while. I started taking other classes, and I found out that I really liked English classes. I liked reading books, I liked reading short stories, and I could talk about them, and I had things that were, I guess, interesting to the teachers to hear, so I would take those classes. Then I found out about this really cool major where you could go camping and rock climbing and hiking and backpacking. It's called outdoor education. I was like, yeah, sign me up. So I started that major, and I had a great time, and my grades got a lot better, and I stopped drinking. That helped a lot as well. And so things went up. So I finished at UNH, and I graduated, did okay. It took me 5 years, but I ended up with a dual major in outdoor education and English literature. Oops, wrong way. So I kept working in the summers, and I also was doing this outdoor education stuff, so then I started to find some jobs related to that, where I'd work at summer camps, taking kids on backpacking trips. And I really loved that. I enjoyed taking them out, working with groups of kids, being out in the wilderness, teaching. It was really fun for me. So after I graduated, I actually got a chance to stay there, and now I got to teach those classes that I had taken. So I got to teach rock climbing and fun classes like that. That was really fun. And then I went on a whole wild journey, okay? Oh, one thing I should say, while I was at UNH, I didn't have any idea about like what my career path was. I didn't think about like if these were good classes for getting a master's or a PhD. In fact, I didn't really know what a master's or a PhD was. I would hear people talk about grad school and masters and doctorate and doctoral, and I was like, well, isn't a doctor the guy you go to when you're sick? And I didn't know what all those things meant. And I just didn't think about those at all. So I had this weird path after that. So I moved out to Colorado because that was cool, and I could work at a ski area, and I could ski a lot, and I was an EMT because I got that training at UNH. And what else did I do? Then I moved to a different part of Colorado for the summer where I worked in a state park, and I did maintenance on the trails and things like that. That was really fun. And then, hey, how about join the Navy? Sure, that's a great idea. So I joined the Navy, which was like really out of left field. All the people in my life were like, what on earth are you doing? This is crazy, but I did that. Then after I finished there, I moved to Wisconsin, and I went back into outdoor education. And I worked for a school district where I would do outdoor education programming for all the kids, kindergarten through high school. It's really fun. I would set up trips for the high school kids to go canoeing, rock climbing, things like that. For the kindergartners or the younger kids, we'd do things like build igloos and do science on the igloos and stuff like that. So along with all this, then life comes in. I met my wife, my future wife. I moved back to California, where I became a classroom teacher at a school for kids with learning disabilities. So anybody see the theme here so far of who I like to work with, what population? Kids, yeah. That's really what it turned out. Is I realized I really work well with kids, and I like working with kids. It took me a long time to figure that out, but that's what it was. So now I'm at Stanbridge, and I'm a bit older. I've had a lot of life experience, and now people are saying, "Hey, why don't you get a PhD? Why don't you go back to school? Why don't you, do more?" I'm going, well, maybe, or I don't know. What should I do? So I went to De Anza and took some gen ed psychology courses to qualify for master's programs, and I took abnormal psych and a few other classes. And I remember the professor in the abnormal psych class, he got to know the students, and asked, like, I was older than most of the other students. So he was like, "Oh, what are you interested in?" So I'm going to do this program. He said, "Yeah, you should get a PhD." And I still was like, me, PhD, what? No, I'm not that smart. You gotta be like a smart guy to get a PhD. That's not for me. So I was like, but maybe I could do this master's thing. So I went to Notre Dame de Namur for a marriage and family therapy master's program. And it turns out I didn't like it, which was actually good, because it just wasn't a great fit for me. The program wasn't that great for me at the time. But it was kind of good because what then ultimately happened is that I ended up going for the PhD, which now I'm really happy that I did that. But it took a long time for me to really even get the idea into my own head that I could do that I could get a PhD. Before I did the PhD though, my wife, she finished her PhD and we moved to Massachusetts for her postdoc, and I was a stay-at-home dad for 2 years. And I also worked at a group home for adults with severe mental illness, and so I got more experience in this new area of psychology. And then I came back to California. I went to Palo Alto University, where I got the PhD in clinical psychology. I got a lot of clinical experience all around the Bay Area, at Kaiser, at different clinics and things like that. And that led to SRI and my private practice. And really, it's not the PhD, it's not any one thing, it's all of these together that got me where I am today. I never in a million years would have thought that I would be a research psychologist at SRI International. In fact, when I first went there, I met Dr. Edie Sullivan, who is one of the head researchers there. I had a nice meeting with her. I remember coming home and talking to my wife and saying, well, that was a nice meeting, but it was a waste of my time because they would never hire me. They hire like really smart scientists or hardcore researchers. But they needed me at the time because they were doing this new study with kids. And they needed a kid person, and I'm a kid person. Because I did swim lessons, because I did hiking trips, because I did teaching, all those things actually led to getting this job. And I never would have predicted that they would have led to that job, but they did. So you can do lots of things in life, all kinds of different things, and they might all be leading you somewhere, and you might not know where they're leading you. I certainly did. So that's my story there. Any questions about this path, this story, the places I went, what I did, the choices I made? Yes?
How important do you think the Navy was?
Not important, actually, to my career development. It might have been more important to my personal development. It was a mistake. It was actually a huge mistake in my life. But I did it, and I learned to accept it and move on, and that's okay. Yeah. But it wasn't with kids. Okay, it wasn't. My themes have been teaching, helping people to learn, children. Navy was none of that. But for some reason, I had some ego need to do something like that. Yeah, that's what happens sometimes. Sometimes we make bad decisions, but it's okay. You can keep going. You can recover from them. Yeah. Any other questions about this process? Did you have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Gregory Anderson, Vice President of Instruction, thank you for coming. My question is to help folks who aren't of the age that they've had this realization. How old were you when you came to that realization that you are a sum of the parts, that you are who you are because of all these experiences, not because of the certain letters after your name?
Yeah, I think it was around when I transitioned from after this program to the PhD program. So I was in my 30s at that point. Some people have claimed that I'm immature, so maybe it could happen earlier or sooner for other people. But yeah, I was in my 30s, and it was really doing comparisons and really looking at my life and seeing I'm a smart person. I can figure things out just as well as other people, and then sort of seeing this arc, this trajectory of working with kids and saying, oh wow, I've got all these cool experiences. When I introduce myself to people and I describe those experiences, people act like, wow, cool. And that reinforced for me the idea like, oh, I have something to offer. Yeah. Does that answer the question? Thanks. Any other questions about this part? Yes?
How did you decide to start your business?
So I finished grad school, and when you finish your PhD in clinical psychology, you're not finished. You still have to get a license, which involves a lot of studying and taking a big statewide exam, a national exam, actually 2 exams, one state, one national. Then I had to get insurance. While I was doing that, I was working at SRI full time, and I was really missing that clinical work because I do work with the research participants, but it's not the same. For the most part, they're just average, great kids. And I missed that helping, where I could actually use my knowledge and skills to help people. So it was sort of like, oh, I'm missing this. I like my job, I really love it, but I'm missing this one thing. And hey, I just spent 5 years training to do this thing, and I'm not doing it right now. I'm doing other things using my education, but I just wanted that back in my life. So it took some time though. I had to get insurance, malpractice insurance. I had to find a location where I could get some office space, and it's difficult. It's still difficult. I don't have a full clientele yet because I'm kind of new and I'm only doing it part-time, so I don't have a lot of clients. I'd like more patients, but that'll come in time. And I feel really lucky because I have the other full-time job. It's okay if some weeks I don't see anybody. I'm still earning enough money, I still have benefits, I still have health insurance, so it works out. But yeah, I just really missed it. I really love when I can do it now. Yeah, good. Any other questions about my career or my education? No? Okay. All right, so what we'll talk about next is more of the science of the research that I do. And so this part, I have several videos and some examples of the studies that we do. I'm going to talk about MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, because that is really the core of our NCANDA research. And I'll show you some pictures and some videos, but these pictures up here are MRI images that we collect from our studies. If you can't see them, there'll be better pictures up on the screen. But that's really the most important part of this brain study that we're doing, is looking at the human brain as it develops. So we're going to talk about MRI and then the other things we do in our study. And so this part's really open. If you have questions about MRI, about studies, about other things you've heard, about sleep, please let me know, okay? And there are a lot more videos, so there may be more technical problems, but hopefully not. Okay, I'm going to try to fix this, and let's see if we can do it this way. Yay, here we go.
MRIs use protons, which are abundant in the human body. All protons spin, creating a small magnetic charge. When a strong magnetic field is introduced, as is the case in an MRI machine, the protons align with that field. The MRI technician then introduces a radio frequency pulse that disrupts the proton and forces it either into a 90-degree or 180-degree realignment with the static magnetic field. Since the radio frequency pulse pushed the proton against its nature, once this pulse is turned off, the protons realign with that magnetic field, releasing electromagnetic energy along the way. The MRI is able to detect this energy and is able to differentiate various tissues based on how quickly they release energy after the pulse is turned off.
Okay, so that's a really technical definition of what MRI does and how we collect these images. So, okay, how do we get from those protons spinning to these cool pictures of the brain? Well, what they're describing there is that mechanism where the proton gets twisted and gets aligned with the magnetic field, then it springs back, okay? Now the thing that to add to that helps understand this is that spring back, and it showed it releases some energy, that's the really important part. Because different parts of the body sort of have rebound rates that are different, depending on the density and the amount of water that's there. Because an MRI is mostly just working on water molecules or particles that are springing back and forth. So turn on the magnet, boom, they all point this way. Turn the magnet off, they all go back to their normal state. Some go back fast, some go back slow. And we can detect how quickly they go back to those states. And by measuring that, we can differentiate different types of matter in the body. So in this image, we can find parts that are all fluid, which are very dark, okay? The parts that are lighter are less dense. So we can measure density. We can find bone, heart, things like that. That's the real basic idea of how MRI works. Now, MRI is something that is constantly being developed. And at SRI, we're sort of lucky and sort of unlucky because our MRI machine is a GE, General Electric machine, and we have a partnership with General Electric. And so right on site at where we have our scanner, our MRI scanner, are GE employees and researchers. And they are always like testing that machine. They're like race car drivers. They're putting new things in there. They're trying to figure out new ways to make it work, ways to make it stronger, faster, better, which is really cool, except they always break it, and then it messes up our research. But they fix it again, too. So we use MRI to get these images, and I'm going to talk about some other types of MRI, but let's go into the next part. So you see these images, they're just like two-dimensional, they're slices. So let's take a look at how these slices work. And this is a video from GE that's, I think, really cool. So what we do when we take these images, we take a whole bunch of slices of the brain, and you'll see what I mean from this next video. So that's what we do with the brain, is they were physically slicing things up. Now, you can do that with a cadaver brain, and there are studies that do that. They take cadaver brains and then they treat them like they did the baseball and the violin, and then they actually physically slice them up. That's great. You can get really, really thin brain slices, and you can learn a lot about the brain, but it's a dead brain, and you need a dead person. We want to do this on live people. So we use MRI, and we do a very similar thing. Now, I think the violin had like 45 slices. We do thousands of slices. So we get a lot more slices because we're doing it MRI. But this shows a good point and a good limitation of MRI. Imagine you were from another planet and you didn't know what a violin was, and somebody gave you those pictures, those slices of the violin. Do you think you could figure out the function of the violin looking at all those pictures? It'd be challenging, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be like picking up a violin and playing it. You might be able to figure it out, but it'd be hard work. And that's kind of what we face when we look at the brain images. It's not the real thing, it's just a picture of it. So here's what your brain looks like on MRI. So these are the slices, just like they did with the violin and the baseball and the fruit. But here's what our brain images look like. This is called a structural MRI, and the goal of this scan would have been to measure the structure and look at the structure of this brain. So measure the size of the hippocampus, measure the size of the frontal lobes, measure the volume of the pons, measure the different size and shapes of the brain. So we do these with all of our kids, and we do them every year to look at how these brain sizes change. And so we're interested to find out, do the kids, when they start drinking, does a part of their brain shrink? Or is there another part of it that gets bigger? Do kids that go on to drink, maybe they have a smaller frontal lobe to begin with, and that's what leads them to drink? We're not really sure. There's this sort of a chicken or egg question in alcohol research. What came first, the brain difference or the alcohol? So we know that there are differences in the brains when you look at groups of kids who drink and groups of kids who don't drink. But we don't know why are those differences there. Were they there at birth and they lead you to drink or not drink? Or does drinking bring about these differences? So that's something we're really interested in learning about. Here's what your brain looks like after years of drinking. And I mean a lot of years. These are two men in their 50s. One is a control who had a normal drinking history, and one is an alcoholic who had a very heavy drinking history. Anybody, you can look a few more times. Anybody want to make a guess which one is the alcoholic? Yes. The left? How many people think the left? How many people think the right? The right, okay, the right. Yeah, so if you look up here, what part of the brain are we seeing there? Anybody know the name of that? Ventricles. These are the ventricles. So these are fluid-filled spaces in the center of the brain, and they're much bigger in the alcoholic brain, which means that the brain itself is smaller because there's more empty space in there. Yes?
Did you ever have a control where the person has never drank before?
Yes, yeah. I mean, in our NCANDA study, we have a lot of kids who've never drank before. With our adult studies, that's less common. It's quite, most people have had at least some alcohol in their life. But this is somebody who has, gosh, I had it for another talk that I gave more on alcohol. This person has consumed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of liters of alcohol in his life, and it's really damaged his brain. So we compare this brain imaging data with other things, with behavioral data, with sleep data, to discover relationships. So, thank you. So this is a picture of our sleep lab. So we take people who have done a lot of drinking, let's say, we put them in our sleep lab and we look at their brain while they're sleeping, and we see how it's different than the people who don't drink. We also do that with our kids. We also do neuropsychological testing, so we can find out how good are you at remembering things, how good are you at solving different types of puzzles, and then compare that to the brain images and see if we see a difference. Here's something that I want you to take a look at. Okay, take a look at these images here. Okay, and now tell me which ones go together. answers. There's A and C and B and D. So that's like a test of spatial working memory that we might do. We would do a whole series of those and see how good you were at remembering those. And then we can look at your brain and those scores and see, is there a difference? And we have found that in teenagers who drink a lot, they do poorly on tests like that. They don't do as well. The other thing we found out is that not only do they not do as well, but when they do those tasks, they're using their brains differently than the kids who haven't drank. And that leads us to the other types of brain imaging that we do. So there's structural imaging, where we're looking at the size, the shape, everything else. But we also do diffusion tensor imaging, which is, this is an image. And DTI is looking at the neural networks in the brain. How are the different brain regions connected? And so we can look at how well is your frontal lobe connected to your visual part of your brain, things like that. We also do functional MRI, so we can actually look at your brain while you're in the scanner and see what parts of your brain are using. So with our kids who drank more, with that visual working memory, they didn't do as well, but more importantly, they used different parts of their brain. They had to work harder to remember those pairs, because we don't know exactly why, but that was what was different between those kids and the kids who hadn't drank alcohol. So we have just a few minutes left, or about 10 minutes left, and I'd like to open up to more questions. Yes?
How do you account for different factors like malnutrition or drugs?
Great question. How do you account for the different factors that could impact all those tests and different things like that? Well, one is you screen people beforehand, and we exclude some people from the study. So, for example, premature birth is what was exclusionary. If you were born very premature, you're not allowed to be in the study. There are other exclusionary factors that we think could where you'd be starting out with a different baseline. The other way that you control for that is with a really large sample size. By collecting a large sample size, if you do have some people who had poor nutrition, you're going to also have some people who have better nutrition, and statistically they're going to sort of balance each other out. You can only do it as best as you can, but you try to strike a balance between getting a representative sample of just average normal people. We had another question earlier about the sample. You strike a balance between getting a really representative sample and getting a really clean sample, where you eliminate all these other factors. And it's a really tricky balance, but that's a really good question. Yeah. Good. Any other questions? Yes?
The whole MRI process, is there anything like damaging about it?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that. No. MRI is completely safe. It uses... No, right. It's different than an X-ray or a CT scan. A lot of people, especially parents, were really worried when I was like, oh, and we want to scan your child's brain once a year, every year for 4 years. They're like, no! And then I would explain. So it uses the strong magnetic field, which is just a really strong magnet, which has no discernible impact on biological functioning, and radio waves. So, but no ionizing radiation. Ionizing radiation is the kind in X-rays that can damage your DNA. It does use radiation. I don't use that when I tell parents, but it doesn't use ionizing radiation. But your car radio uses radiation. Your cell phone uses radiation. I mean, it's electromagnetic radiation, but not ionizing, which is the distinction. So yeah, you can. I've been scanned maybe 30 times. In fact, when I go to all the other sites, they scan my brain every time. I'm a human phantom. I'm like a control at all the sites. Good question. Yeah, totally safe. Any other questions? Yes?
How big is your play right now?
We in all the sites we have 168 at SRI, and all the sites all total have over 800. I think around 830 total in the study, and hopefully we can hold on to them and keep them in the study. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
How much of what you do is logistical organization? How much is coming up with studies? Like, what's your typical day like?
Me personally,
Yeah.
it's all more the logistical side, right? So it's very much the logistical side. So the way our research study works is there are sort of different levels, and at the, I guess you could say at the top level, are the PIs, which stands for Principal Investigators. These are the people who wrote the grant, who came up with the idea, who have done lots of research studies in the past, and they are the people who eventually will write the papers and publish them. I'm in the middle, and then with me or below me are the research associates who actually do the actual work. And so I kind of like where I am because I actually know more about the study than the PIs. They don't know what's going on. they come to me and say, Devin, do we know how much these kids weigh? I'm like, yeah, we've been collecting their height and weight. Oh, good. Oh, thank goodness. That's really important for my paper. Okay, good. But they don't really know how it's getting done. I'm the one making sure it's all happening. And so I go to them and I say, hey, there's a problem here because the way the questionnaire is worded, we're not getting the right answer about socioeconomic status. What should we do? Do you want me to change it? Do you want me to fix it? So I kind of know that stuff, and I also am in the trenches getting my hands dirty, collecting the data. So I'm kind of valuable to them. They really value that in me. That's why I get to go to all the sites and I sort of see the big picture, whereas they're pretty focused on, the ethereal science in their ivory towers. But no, they're really great too. Yeah, good question. The idea is maybe someday I'd move on to doing the kind of work they do, but personally, I actually hope I don't. They have to beg for money all the time, and that's the nature of science, and that's what my wife does. She's a great researcher in a different field, in geology, but she has to work really hard to get paid. She has to ask people, she has to come up with these great ideas and then propose them to get the money, and that's really stressful. I don't think I would like that kind of stress personally. Good question. Any more questions? Yes?
Do you know if SRI has any research opportunities or internships available for undergraduates?
Yeah, that is a great question. Unfortunately, rarely. For some reason, I don't understand why, SRI does not accept volunteers. If you work for us, we have to pay you. And I know you'd like to pay. I know I'd love to pay you. We don't have any money though. And that's it. At all the other sites, the 4 other sites, they have a lot of people like you who would love to get the experience, and they come and they work in some capacity, scoring, entering data, but they're getting exposed to the research, and it's great. We don't have that. It's a big challenge for us. And it's just the policy that SRI has, unfortunately. Yeah. So I think we're very near the end. I will be here. Some people don't like to ask questions in front of a group, so you can come up to me, and I'm happy to chat for half an hour or so. Thanks very much. I really enjoyed it.